Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rules Committee meeting for Monday, October 16th, 2017. Welcome. We have a quorum and all present. The first item on our agenda is a citizen comment. I have 2 pages of people signed up. This is for the Rules Committee, so I'm just going to mention before we start, if you intended to sign up for the City Council Committee meeting, when I call your name, if you could just let us know that, and of course we would welcome you at that meeting as well, or instead, but I'm going to go through the list here. Because of the number of people we have signed up and because the council meeting is scheduled to start at 7 o'clock, I'd like everyone to keep their comments to 1 minute and 30 seconds. So first we have Elliot Zashin, Doug Sharp, and Richard Fleer.
Good evening, council members. My name is Elliot Zashin. I live at 715 Asbury Avenue in the 9th Ward, and I'm a member of Reclaim Evanston. I'm here because I've been troubled about an effort to take away the Freedom of Information Act duties from our clerk, Devon Reed. I worked for Devon Reed's election quite a bit. I met him and talked with him, and I was very impressed with what he wanted to do with the clerk's office. I felt he really wanted to turn it into an office that would help citizens get access to information about city government. He was very passionate about that, and I felt that this was great. Here's a young man who really wants to do something for the city and to turn an office, an elected office, into a more active, proactive office, dealing with things like voter participation. So to learn that now, because of some complaints that members of the council have, that maybe he has not handled the FOIA powers well, they should be taken away from him. This was one of the things that he campaigned on, that he would work with, and I don't understand why the council would support such a move. I feel if there were things that can be fixed up, he's offered to do that. He made corrections when things were brought to his attention. So I'm really troubled that anybody would so quickly decide that Devon Reed should not have these powers, and I really urge all of you to keep the powers with Devon. And if there needs to be some tweaking, maybe he needs more staff, let's have it. But let's not take powers away from somebody dedicated to really improving the accessibility and transparency of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp?
Good evening. My name is Doug Sharp. I live at 2028 Cleveland Street in the 9th Ward, and I'm a member of Reclaim Evanston. As a member of Reclaim Evanston, I worked hard over the winter to get Devon elected. Contributed funds, contributed my time, canvassed, talked to people. I was inspired by Devon in terms of what he was going to bring to the city. He pledged to modernize the clerk's office. In particular, he promised to streamline the city's FOIA process, which is something that is, I think, critical to the operation of the city in a transparent and open government. And now he is being attacked by aldermen for doing exactly what he had promised to do. I strongly object to the proposal that FOIA responsibilities be removed from the city clerk. Mr. Reed ran on a platform of greater transparency in the city of Evanston. That is what he is attempting to do, and Reclaim Evanston supports him in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could kind of just keep the applause down so we can move more quickly. Mr. Fleer?
My name is Richard Fleer. I live at 918 Washington Street, apartment 4F, in the 9th Ward, and I'm a member of Reclaim Evanston. This past spring, the volunteers of Reclaim Evanston helped elect Devon Reed by a 2-to-1 margin. That was a higher percentage of the vote than any of you received who ran against an opponent except for one. Now, for me, it's Monday evening. I should be at home resting from a hard day's work. Instead, I gotta come out. Come out here and hear that some people are having problems with somebody different in the city clerk's position. I got better things to do with my time than to have you than to hold your hand through all this change.
About 10 more seconds.
Do not try to suppress the will of the people and take away Mr. Reed's FOIA responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Lyons, Cindy Bush, and Chris White.
I'm Barbara Lyons. I live at 1414 Hinman in the 4th Ward, and I am not here as a member of anything. I am here as a citizen. I worked to elect Devon, and as I think about myself as a young person in my first jobs, I made some mistakes. And if I wasn't mentored, if somebody didn't help me, and it sounds like you are just jumping on this young man, if he needs some assistance, how about you guys assist him or get him some assistance? We wanted him, and some of us didn't want you guys, so please, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Cindy Bush.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Bush, and I live at 2028 Cleveland Street in the 9th Ward. I am a member of Reclaim Evanston, and I supported Devon Reed when he ran for city clerk last spring. As you've already heard, Devon received 9,735 votes in that election. He is the top vote getter in all of the races, including the mayor's race. So if any elected official in Evanston received a mandate, that was Devon Reed. During the campaign, I was very impressed by the number of young people who volunteered for Devon. These were college students and high school students, some of them not even old enough to vote. But they were participating in a campaign because they were inspired by Devon's youth and by his vision. His campaign introduced them to the electoral process and to the obligation we all have to participate in our government. And their candidate won. I think of those young people tonight, and I'm very saddened by the message that I think some of you want to send. And make no mistake, this is what they will hear. If you try to use the electoral process to make change in our city government, even if you win by an overwhelming majority of the vote, you will be shut down by the establishment and told to stay in your place. Don't send that message.
Thank you. Next is Chris White, and after Chris is Len Lampkin and Chris Kruger.
Good evening. My name is Chris White. I live at 943 Judson in the 3rd Ward. I am a member of Reclaim Evanston. I did a lot of work on Clerk Reed's campaign. Clerk Reed very much campaigned on having a more open, transparent city government. I use FOIA quite a bit in a number of different professional and personal capacities and social capacities, and it really feels that the attack on Clerk Reed's FOIA powers are an attack on my votes and the votes of many others. Thank you.
Thank you. Len Lampkin.
Good evening. I'm Lenny Lampkin. I live at 835 Ridge Avenue in the 9th Ward. I didn't meet the clerk until after he was elected. I was working on a presidential campaign, and I was traveling the country for my regular job. The question here, to me, as a citizen of Evanston, it sounds like some folks on the city council may be picking on him because he made some mistakes. But they may be also picking on him. If you remember, I came and spoke out on the minimum wage ordinance. And I wonder whether this is retribution for him saying you guys violated the FOIA Act. And if that's what's going on here tonight, It smells an awful lot like the President of the United States. When he doesn't like somebody,
Can we please keep
he
it down and be
promises to
respectful?
fire them and take away their powers. And as I remind people, when you think, some of you city councilors were thinking about privatizing city workers, I said, this ain't Wisconsin, this is Evanston. If you vote to take away these FOIA powers, I will work my butt off to send you a pink slip. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Kruger?
Christopher Kruger, 2022 Dodge, 5th Ward, Reclaim Evanston. This council does not have the power to nullify the election of a U.S. Congresswoman, or nullify the election of a Cook County Commissioner, or nullify the election of an Illinois State Senator, all of whom opposed the stunt pulled by this administration of calling a meeting to attack the most vulnerable, the poorest, the most exploited people working in the city of Evanston, minimum wage workers, and give a platform to the Chamber of Commerce to talk a lot of supply side economics. But you can attack Reed, and you can marginalize Reed, and you can try to delegitimize Reed. It's deplorable. It's wrong. He got 700 more votes than anybody sitting on this podium up here. He got 700 more votes than anyone else up here. It's wrong. You have no business taking his things. And by the way, for the record, I object to a minute and a half as a thing, and I reserve any recourse attendant to that. I also object to any tone policing by the chair, as long as people are not obscene or not profane. They can say whatever they want in whatever tone they want to say it. So I'm for Devon Reed. I'm backing him up. He won fair and square. Don't mess with our clerk.
Thank you. Janad Risky. After Janad, Carol Lind and Tony Willis.
Janad Risky. I've lived here 33 years. I was in the Jewel the other night, and a former city employee came up to me and said, how's my daughter doing, my little girl? Well, it's been 28 years. I've been here a long time looking into city issues. Unfortunately, the two employees that we talked about have both passed away. But one thing I would say about those two employees, they had integrity. And we don't seem to have that today here with a lot of the staff members. There's been misinformation spread about the city clerk and other things here. It's very unfortunate, and I mean it's disgusting, really, as a taxpayer that I'm paying for this nonsense that's going on here. And frankly, I didn't vote for Mr. Reed, but that doesn't mean I don't support what he does. And I'll leave you with something else. Last year, when I was dealing in a committee, a citizen on that committee was touted as an expert, and that citizen was not an expert. After I checked into it, he did not hold a license to practice what he was discussing in the committee. This council better start to look at the qualifications of people you appoint to committees and find out what's going on, because I believe that individual was put there for political reasons. And frankly, that would be if I'd consider taking him to the state for that at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Lind.
Hello, my name is Carol Lind. I live at 2333 Lincoln Street in the 6th Ward. I've never spoken to meetings such as this before, but I've been very disappointed with the discourse about and between the various parts of Evanston's government involving the city clerk's office and the FOIA request process. Some of the biggest outrage that I've heard reported was about the fact that requests themselves are viewable. I did a bit of my own research, including taking the Illinois Attorney General's public online training, and it appears to me that the identity of a requester is indeed public information, and requesters should have no expectation of privacy. The other primary issue seems to be the proper handling of information that is indeed exempt from FOIA and should be kept private. Obviously, time and care has to be taken to get this right. City departments should work together to support the city clerk's office, and the clerk's office should be very careful not to put speed ahead of care. It's a complicated area, and so people have to pay close attention. I looked at the websites of a number of different cities of about Evanston's size, and from my very unscientific example, I think the city clerk's is often the office that does this, although I acknowledge the point that the clerk is not always elected. It is also the case that police report requests are often handled separately through the police department or another part of the city. I don't agree with the recommendation in the materials for the meeting today to have everything kept offline. I would much prefer to see the substance of requests and the responses online. I'm ambivalent about whether the identity of the requester is viewable. I also see merit in handling requests for police reports and the like differently and with more deference to privacy. I call your attention in particular to the websites of Ann Arbor, Michigan and San Diego.
If you could wrap it up then. Yes.
Okay. Which are done well and have good warnings about what will be public, so no one will be surprised. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Willis?
My name is Tony Willis. I live at 1044 Asbury Avenue, and I'm a resident of the Fourth Ward. This is the first time I've spoken at a public meeting such as this, and this is the first time actually I've been involved in local politics. I have worked for a number of presidential campaigns over the years, and also I worked on Barack Obama's first Senate campaign. But I was very impressed with what I heard from Devon Reed. I am a member of Reclaim Evanston, and I was involved in canvassing for him, and I did, in fact, I was one of those 9,700 odd voters, and I was particularly pleased to hear what he wanted to do in terms of opening up the FOIA process, making the city government more transparent and accessible. For me, it's a very puzzling process trying to work my way through how you all come to decisions. It doesn't seem to be as clear and transparent as perhaps it could be. And I'm really puzzled as to why there's such a rush
About 10 seconds.
so early in his tenure to take away this responsibility. As people have said, yes, there may have been mistakes made, but if it is a learning process, then you don't kick the person out of school in the first semester because they make mistakes. You help
If you could
them.
wrap it up.
So I would like to say, as a person just becoming involved in this, some more information from you as to why you're doing this and why you are not assisting him in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lonnie Wilson, Ted Smuckler, and Leslie Williams.
Hello. My name's Lonnie Wilson. I live at 1725 Dodge in the 5th Ward, but at this moment I hang out at 500 Asbury at the Grove Nursing Home. But I'm here for actually two reasons. One, I did help when Devon was trying to get elected, but also there's another thing that no one seems to have touched, the power of information. And I really do believe that this body has a fear of that information. And if that's the problem, putting someone as the gatekeeper of that information is really critical. And I think that Devon is the person who should be that gatekeeper. I like the rest of you, but I don't trust the rest of you. So let's just try to keep things as they are. Because for the first time in my life, I saw an African-American woman at the gas station tell me how much help she got from Devon trying to find out about information. The people in the neighborhood I grew up in are now able to get their things answered. That was not happening before, and I don't think it'll happen again if we put a new officer in charge.
Thank you.
And there's a reason why we're doing this. Now, I'll let everybody else figure out what the reason is. I won't say that because I might end up in trouble.
Ted Smuckler.
Right, and I can't run anymore, right?
Thank you. I'm Ted Smuckler. I'm the Senior Organizer Manager of Organizing for Open Communities. First, I want to thank you for passing a very strong welcoming ordinance. You did a great job on that, and we're very proud that you did that. Secondly, in terms of Mr. Reed, I see no reason to strip these powers from him except
for fear that information will get out. I think of him as somebody who's all about transparency and all about community involvement, and that's what you would want from an elected official and the person who's handling FOIA information. Can I ask, is the ordinance on the Commission for Equity on this agenda?
It's on the council agenda.
Okay. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Williams. After Leslie is, I can't really read it, but I think it's Tooney Pappas and Thomas Klein.
Good evening, everyone. I want to speak a little bit about the notion of the records in the database being available only to the person who requested them. I am a former city employee, as you all know, so I've been on both sides of the FOIA situation. And I think you need to be careful when we're talking about words like privacy and appropriate and what they actually mean. There are things that may make us uncomfortable to be in a publicly accessible database, but they're absolutely vital for public transparency. Now, I know there are concerns about the situation where, say, a private person is described or mentioned in an email that goes to someone in city government, and thus it becomes discoverable through FOIA. But that can also work the other way around. So, for example, if there is something that's been said about a private citizen, they may not know to request a FOIA for it, but it may come out in someone else's FOIA. And so by having that available in a public database, that gives them more information about what may be said about them by someone in a public body. And I think it's critical that that remains open to the public and that it's administered by an independent elected official so that all of the information about someone is available, both the perhaps the spurious information, but also the exonerating and explanatory information, and that people have a chance to look at all of it and make their own decisions. I think it's also important to realize that Evanston is not unique in keeping the FOIA database searchable by everyone, including not just people who made the request. The Next Request company lists many, many different cities that do this. San Diego, New Orleans, Middlebury, Massachusetts, Miami. So this is not a particularly bizarre thing to be doing. And it also, there's simple efficiency questions. As Next Request says, the best and only way to fight increases in FOIA requests volume is keeping the database available to the public. The EPA does this, Chicago Public Schools do this. So even if only 20% or 10% of your requests are for records that have already been released, that's a significant amount of time and saving for your agency and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Tooney Pappas and Thomas Klein after.
Hi, Timmy Pappas, 729 Simpson Street. I don't have a dog in this fight. I didn't know Mr. Reed. Wouldn't have known him if I ran into him. But it seems to me, as rather an outsider, because I don't follow these things closely, that you folks have gone off the rails. You have stripped, from what I've read, mail service, passport service, transfer tax business. You have just made everything, you've tossed everything up in the air, and we're all focusing on the FOIA issue. And I do agree with other people much more eloquent than I am that should be, I mean, this is not the White House. Information in this city, if not this country, should be open and available to citizens, especially if it reflects badly on any of our elected officials. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thomas Klein. After Mr. Klein, Kim Robinson and Alex Morgan.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, members of the council. There are many advisory opinions of the Illinois Attorney General's Office on Freedom of Information Act matters. I request that information be taken into the council to help it in its deliberations, and that this matter related to the Freedom of Information Act duties of the city clerk be extended to another meeting of this body so that those advisory opinions of the Illinois Attorney General may be taken into account. The Corporation Counsel appears not to have referred to them in his a set of documents set before you. Secondly, when one reads the literature connected to those advisory opinions, either before the opinions or after them, there are appellate law decisions which would also help you, I believe, in your deliberations. Upon consultation with an experienced Freedom of Information Act attorney, he advised me to ask you to extend this complicated matter to another meeting of the body so that citizens and other legal researchers may give you their advice before you give your advice and consent to the city government. Thank you.
Kim Robinson. Okay. Okay, thank you. Alex Morgan. After Alex is William Pierce and Tricia Conley.
Good evening, Alex Morgan. I wanted to echo the woman who spoke just a couple before me. I would say I don't have a dog in this fight, and I would add I'm more here to speak about the whole House. A lot of folks prior to me have talked about the election and how it was a top issue to highlight FOIA and open government, and so that's been stated. There have been some legal arguments, and Leslie spoke so eloquently about transparency. What I wanted to get at is, I don't question too many of the intentions behind why this question was raised. I think they were meaningful in the most part, and so I'm not here to point fingers, but I think that to take such a rash reaction and institute this conversation about reevaluating the FOIA officer is going too far when we've had these conversations about openness and transparency. And some of the information, while clerk staff have pointed out that there were some errors, there's also some of the reporting on this that has been retracted because city staff were saying inaccurate things. So I would hope that we would hold back on this, take the appropriate steps to make sure that the clerk is thinking in the best interest of the people, which I think he does, and making sure that we maintain openness and transparency, not just for this clerk, but for any clerk going forward that we elect well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. William Pierce.
Hi, my name is Will Pierce, and I'm a member of Lucy Parsons Labs, a Chicago police accountability nonprofit, Chicago-based, that is. We filed dozens of FOIAs with Chicago police and are currently engaged in several lawsuits, and I don't think I need to remind anybody in 2017 why we think that's such crucial work. Now, being a resident of Evanston, I've also filed 3 Freedom of Information Act requests regarding the Evanston Police Department. Evanston has always conducted itself in an accurate, timely, and courteous manner. So when I saw that the FOIA system was down online, I was concerned, but not deeply so. But I was especially disturbed when I heard reports of a plan for Evanston to take FOIA power from Reed, an elected official, and place it in the hands of the police department. So I'm here tonight to offer what I can think of as a warning that the city of Evanston seems to be heading toward a culture of silence and obfuscation when we can least afford it, and I'd like to make sure that the doors of information stay as wide open as they can.
Thank you. Thank you. Tricia Conley, and after Tricia is Meg Welsh, and we'll just go with Meg, and I'll try to figure out the next name.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Conley. I live at 908 Greenwood, and I'm here tonight to support Devon Reed. A while back, before the election, Devon came to my house. I hosted a coffee for him as he was running his campaign. He was inspirational. He was very clearly in a place that he has got the public good in front of him, in his head and in his heart. Inspirational. The thing that also concerns me that maybe we haven't addressed tonight is, how does somebody start a job at the city of Evanston and get the support they need? How is it that Devon Reed begins his position and doesn't get to shadow the other person who held the position? Why is no one overseeing that and demanding that that happen? So this is a question. Another question is, how about the former employees that worked in the office who apparently refused to work with him, stating they don't answer to him? So why is that acceptable? Why was that okay? And in the situation about the FOIA, I am kind of amazed that
10 seconds.
The collaboration that could have occurred to fix this ended up becoming a free-for-all for everybody to show up tonight and try and champion this guy who's probably one of the smartest people in this room, frankly. So I respect this guy. I support him. We all support him. Keep FOIA in the hands of the city clerk, and let's get this done.
Thank you. Meg Welch.
So, council members, I understand you're voting on a proposal, so I'm going to direct you to the proposal. Please look at pages 12 and 13. Some of the memo that you were given for the proposed FOIA policy can be misleading and maybe technically legally on target. It's rhetorically designed to have you take a certain position. If you're not familiar with the Illinois statute, the proposal quotes the Illinois FOIA statute. The FOIA Act is not intended to cause an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Each public body shall promptly provide to any person who submits a request a copy of each public record. The proposal before you to be voted on then states, quote, the statute could not be clearer. Records are to be produced to a requester. One might conclude from this that the clerk did something unusual or inappropriate by putting some FOIA requesters' names online. The proposal says, here's City of Chicago. I have a printout for you, names of requesters. The proposal says the clerk often refused to set FOIA requests to private. The proposal also states, after May 2017, there were issues admitted to by the clerk regarding timely compliance with FOIA requests or other relevant legal standards. This lacks detail and specifics and implies the clerk did not do his duties without substantiating with examples. Is this accurate and fair? Are we supposed to simply trust the words of the author of this proposal? Where is the documentation? It may be worthwhile to be mindful of the various types of defamation and libel recognized under Illinois law. One type is words that impute a lack of ability in a person's trade or profession. Prior to removal of the clerk's FOIA duties, I had never had an extended conversation with him, nor his deputy, beyond good luck, hope you win the election. As an Evanston resident concerned about good government and transparency, I spoke to them since the clerk was relieved of FOIA duties. I can say, in the course of explaining their side of the issue, I was given only facts. They did not impugn the ability or integrity of anyone in this room. I regretfully say that that is not the case regarding conversations I had with elected officials.
Thank you. Okay, I'm having trouble reading this name. Maybe Magian Derser? Starts with an M, A. Madeline. Madeline Ducree. Madeline, are you here? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, you signed up for, why don't I do the other two people and then see if she gets here. Okay, Ray Friedman. After Ray, I have a note on the sheet that says, quote, one more person. I'm not sure who one more person would be. It doesn't have a name. Was it you? Okay.
I sent on the sheet out there, but that's for the next one.
Okay, so, okay, after Mr. Frieden then. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Haggerty, City Council. I'm reading on behalf of the 1300 Pittner Block Club. We consistently urge our young people to make a positive contribution to their community and to work with the political process. Devon Reed has done that. Our young people are watching. Can we expect them to follow his example of leadership if they see they will not be given the opportunity to grow into their responsibilities? Haven't other members of the City Council and city employees made errors? Were they held to the same standard that Devon Reed is being held to now? Why not? Please keep all FOIA responsibilities with Devon Reed in the clerk's office where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you. And just give us your name when you step up.
Yes, my name's Diane Thodos. I live in Evanston, 2668. I've grown up in this city for all of my life, but for 13 years. And I'm really concerned about what's going down today because it seems to be tracking a pattern that casts some light of doubt on the credibility of this body. Well, the last time I was here when there was something shocking going on, it was because we were going to be passing a $15 minimum wage in Evanston, and lo and behold, we were not given the 48 hours in which to get here in order to stop a motion to deny that $15 minimum wage. But thank God Devon Reed was there to support us, to do right by our Evanstonians, and pass this. So I'd say, yeah, that's a really good sign that this man was doing his job, and there's something going on behind the scenes here that was trying to upend a duty to support Evanston citizens and a $15 minimum wage. And from what I understand, this seems to be something that draws an issue of not suspicion on him, but on those who voted against him. Now, I know that Fleming and Simmons did not vote to be against him. And I think there's a reason why. I think that they understand the power of the FOIA request in his hands and also the absolute necessity for transparency in our government. And that transparency has been proven by what he's been able to do so far. I worked for Reclaim, and I back Reclaim in this because he was found to be a true progressive. And I worked for the Harley Clark Mansion issues because I did not see transparency in this board, and there were some members that I worked to try to get to replace some of these aldermen. But we'll keep working on that if this proves that there's something wrong in our government because his FOIA powers are being taken away.
Thank you. Did Ms. Dupree arrive? Okay, I don't see her. All right, thank you. And thank you for everyone for coming out tonight.
Make a comment that there's an open spot because two people did not speak and there were third. So I have one submission to make.
Okay.
My name is...
All right, last one. Thank you.
I can sign
Go ahead and tell us your name when you step up.
My name is Leela Robb, and I have noticed a similarity in some of my thoughts. So I will conclude with the summation here is we all did not understand the FOIA process. We understand it better now. It is very important to us that they not get the on-the-job, that they get the on-job training, he does, that I didn't get on my job, because we've all been through that, and it is ineffective. I must make you aware of that. The collaboration of our city officials with each other in terms of helping processes and not combining to thwart progressive ideas is very, very good. And also not to support themes that you were elected to talk to us about before you make your decisions. And the one last comment is the language in the roundtable about How he did not do his job was so nonspecific, it goes back to what the lady just said. There were no facts. It was just charges. It sounded like my old boss when he didn't want to give me a raise. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, and again, thank you, everyone. And hopefully everyone will stay. The clerk issue is not the first item on the agenda, but we will certainly get to that as quickly as we can. First item for consideration is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 11, 2017. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. The next item is the issue of Alderman Suffredin's Amazon representation conflict. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good evening. On page 5 of your packet is a memorandum from the Corporation Counsel. In the interest of time, we're happy to answer questions, but staff is recommending that in order to deal with this conflict in the future, that the bills list be divided between all non-Amazon related city purchases and Amazon related purchases. Alderman Suffredin can vote on the non-Amazon related list and abstain from voting upon the Amazon related list. So again, the Corporation Counsel is here. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Alderman Suffredin, does that suit your needs?
Absolutely, and just for the benefit of the people in the room, I pointed out this potential conflict, and
I point out at your city council on minimum wage, you suggested we shop Evanston.
Pardon me?
You suggested, all of you guys suggested that we shop.
This is the opportunity for folks.
This is that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Alderman Rainey.
I move that we accept the staff report in the question on the bills list regarding Amazon related purchases and otherwise.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that will be adopted. Next item is item 5, policy for choosing board and commission members. I believe this was a reference from Alderman Bruce Simmons and City Manager.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, on page 6 is a memorandum from me regarding this. I've pointed out the appropriate Illinois statutes dealing with mayoral appointments. I've also pointed out the pertinent section of the Evanston City Code, as well as the pertinent sections of the City Council's rules. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And Alderman Bruce Simmons, I'm going to have you address some of your concerns. And Mayor, after that, perhaps you can kind of share some of your observations. I realize you're still relatively new at the job and at the appointment process, but hopefully we can have a conversation about that.
Thank you. My concern was that our appointed committee members don't accurately reflect our community, and I was challenging us to come up with a policy and a process that would make sure that we have representatives from all communities here in Evanston. And so from the memo that's been provided, I see that there is one example where we should not have more than one resident appointed to more than one committee. Am I reading that correctly?
Could you say it again just to make sure?
We should not have a resident appointed to more than one committee?
That has
Mayor?
been. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Bruce Simmons. That has been the practice. I think the a memorandum that was provided to the committee today indicated that the only instance where there are multiple members of standing boards and commissions is when those boards and commissions appoint members to serve on other commissions. So, for example, the Economic Development Committee has a member from ZBA and from the Plan Commission, so those individuals then end up serving on two. Since the memo was produced, there was one exception to that, that there's a member of the Board of Ethics who is also serving on the mayor's ad hoc committee looking at the police complaint process. Strictly speaking, ad hoc committees weren't a scope of the initial request, but otherwise there is no duplication other than as what was mentioned.
Okay. Alderman Rainey, I'm sorry, were you done?
For now.
Okay. Alderman Rainey.
I just wanted to say on behalf of Alderman Tisdall, she actually kept vacancies open as she searched and searched and searched different communities for people to apply. And at some point, those committees were urging her to please put somebody on because they were unable to make quorums. And so that became a problem. But we all have a responsibility, and she begged members of the council to go out into their wards and bring people in to apply for boards and committees.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
So with that said, I would like an opportunity to do outreach to the community to get more participation, to have better representation on the committees, and definitely not have any one resident appointed to more than one committee, even if it is the example that City Manager mentioned. We have how many committees, boards, and commissions?
About 44.
Right. And so with that said, we have residents that are engaged and have a voice and should have a voice, especially when we are creating policy and having opinions on budgets that affect our entire community. So if we can do better, that's a great example. Leave a vacancy open and not have an urgency to fill it without a thoughtful attempt to have a diverse representation on that committee.
Okay, Alderman Ravel.
Just to echo what Alderman Rainey said, in my various service on various nonprofit boards, there'll be the time when the nominating committee is getting ready to look for new board members, and we're always told that everybody on the board is a member of the nominating committee in an unofficial way and is supposed to be out talking with people in the broader community, whatever community that might be, to encourage people to consider becoming a member of the board. And so similarly, I think our job as aldermen is to make sure that we are on the lookout for people for our boards and commissions, and with a mind to making sure that it represents the diversity of our community.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming.
So, City Manager, can you, or even the mayor, I guess, can speak to this? I know that on the CPAC committee, there's one person from each ward. Has that ever been considered for other boards and committees that we have, or try to have one person from each ward serve?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Fleming, each board and commission kind of has its own story as far as requirements. So many of them have different kinds of requirements. I don't think we have it all in one document, so I don't know if there's anything I can point you to online. Really, in the memo that I provided this evening, it's really within the council's purview, other than the 4 or 5 that the mayor has power without forum to appoint. The remainder that power belongs to the city council. So if you wish to look at any one of them, some of the boards and commissions are set by ordinance, some are created by resolution, some are created by a minute order of the city council. So I guess my proposal to the council would be, if there's something you'd like to change, perhaps think about the boards and commissions you're most concerned about, and perhaps look at the makeup and the authorizing language of those boards and commissions. And then maybe there's an opportunity there, either as Alderman Fleming suggesting, one per ward. Not every board and commission has 9 members. But to look at it that way, because otherwise there's just an awful lot. And one of the challenges we have from a staff perspective is when positions are left vacant, sometimes the committees have difficulty having meetings because they aren't able to find quorum. So there's absolutely a balance here. And I think it's a difficult balance, because if you don't have people to fill the positions because you're leaving positions vacant, in order to make sure that every single board and commission looks like Evanston, sometimes there's just so many people involved. So if there's 44 groups times at least 5, that's an awful lot of Evanston residents you're asking to devote time to a board and commission. So again, my suggestion would be, if there's specific groups, boards and commissions you're most concerned about, perhaps at a future meeting look at the documents that created those and see if it makes sense to make some changes to the selection process of those individual boards and commissions.
All right, thank you. Mayor, why don't you just share a little bit about how the process has been going for you in locating people?
Okay, thank you, Chair Wilson. So basically, when it comes to committees and appointing members to those committees, the way it works right now is we look at the folks that have applied, okay, and I suggest to anybody, if you're interested in a committee, you can apply online. Just go to the city's website. We look at the people that have applied. We then look at the composition of the committee right now, okay, in a broad sense, okay, geographically, where do people live, what's their gender, what's their race, what's their occupation, what does the the ordinance require of that committee. Some of these ordinances that establish the boards and commissions require certain skills and capabilities, and that's the process. That's the process that we go through. It is certainly not a perfect process. If we said, hey, you know what, we've got committees that are made up of 9 people, we just want one person from each ward, I'll tell you right now, we will have a challenge having other types of diversity represented potentially on that committee, or we won't be able to fill certain spots. If Mayor Tisdall were here, you know, one of the things that she told me before I took this position is it's a struggle sometimes to get people to apply for committees and all of that. I said during the campaign, and I'll say right now, that yes, I want to have, you know, representative committees and boards and commissions of the city. I think everybody up here wants to have that. And it is incumbent on all of us and all the people in this room and everybody else that's involved to ask people and extend people and say, hey, you know, I know there's an opening here. If you want to get involved in the city, go online and find some committees that you're interested in. But that's, you know, there's a lot of ingredients baked into it. But I see committees as a way that we can have greater inclusion in Evanston and get more people involved. You know, and I think we've done that with the one exception of the one individual who is on the Board of Ethics and on the Citizens Police Complaint Assessment Committee. We've got a whole bunch of new people involved in that committee. Tonight on the council agenda is the Climate Action Work Group that comes before the council. And we'll continue the process that we do as well when I put forward candidates, that comes to the council members beforehand for you all to take a look and give me any feedback on that.
Thank you. And Alderman Ruth Simmons, I think your point about the outreach is important and well taken. Perhaps we could find a way to get the committee chairs more directly involved in some of the, you know, lead-in. They are better dialed into when people are going to be cycling off the committees, and if they could maybe just, as part of their duties, be directed to reach out to you and maybe help develop strategies on how to effectively do that outreach.
You know, let me just add, we could absolutely do that. So one of the things that we do now, just for the public to be aware of, is whenever anyone applies for a committee or a board or commission, I send an email back to them generally within 48 hours. I copy the alderman of the ward that person's in to give visibility to you all. And I think that's a really great suggestion that we could add as another step in the process. Hey, here are vacancies that are going to be upcoming or vacancies that we have now, so that folks have better visibility into all this. As the city manager said, there's a lot of boards and commissions, and you know, it's a big job to get your hands around it all.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
I'll wait for Alderman Nguyen.
Okay, Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you. I think if we could, I realize we can't do this necessarily that frequently, but I think it would be very helpful for the whole community to, maybe on a quarterly basis, to know that there will be, you know, on these committees, there will be openings in the next 3 months. So if you're interested, perhaps you should think about applying. Or, you know, there will be an opening on the Plan Commission, or the ZBA, the Environment Board, over the next 6 months. Think about applying now. We certainly have the city e-newsletter. We all have ward newsletters. I just took a note. I have a town hall meeting next week. I think several of us do. That I'm going to ask to have a list of what are the current vacancies and the upcoming vacancies prepared, so that we can distribute that at our ward meeting. So, you know, we get people who are coming out and are, you know, I think it's a constant reminder of, hey, are you interested? Look at the array of committees. You know, there's something for everyone. And here's the next opening. Maybe this is a good time in your life. You have time to volunteer. This would be a good time to do it. So I think if we just keep letting people know the array of what's available, when a position, when there is going to be an opening, and put your application in, you know. And people can also, it's very important for people to realize, you can, I hope this is correct, Mr. Mayor, you can ask to be appointed to several different, well, you can provide a choice of committees.
You can't be appointed to several, but you can provide your choices of what you'd like to apply for. And then depending on how soon an opening comes up, then that might be beneficial.
Thank you, Alderman Simmons.
So great idea. If we had the information, as Alderman Nguyen is suggesting, that would give us time to do the proper outreach. So I'd like to make a formal recommendation that we have a memo of what vacancies are going to be opening, so we can inform and invite the community to apply, but also to make sure that we have a system, a goal, and so that we don't end up in the same spot where we just didn't get the participation. Let's be more intentional about having a diverse makeup. So if we could come up with a plan on that before we continue filling up all of our open vacancies, I think that would be the most responsible thing to do for the community.
Okay, Alderman Rainey.
Well, Dar Francelno is the mistress of all these lists and knows exactly what committee has people coming up for renewal or dropping off. And so that's why she's so important to the Rules Committee. And she would be the one who would provide us with that. And I'm sure by tomorrow morning she could produce that list.
One more.
Yes.
If we could confirm that there's only that one resident that's on 2 committees, it looks as though, based on our current website, that may not be accurate. So if we can get a confirmation of that as well.
Well, we know that there are numerous people on 2 committees because, for example, on economic development, there's somebody from the Plan Commission, because many committees require that one of their members serve on another committee. They represent another committee. Maybe we should even look at that to see if that's necessary anymore. So that's what happens. And somebody from zoning is required to be on another committee. And so that's where you see the 2 names, the name being the same on different committees. Like somebody on CD is from what? From the Plan Commission. Yeah, and somebody from I mean, I don't know why they do that, but I guess it's to share information from the other committee. I don't know.
All right, thank you. Alderman Nguyen.
Well, I was just going to say, for instance, on transportation and parking, we have a member of the Environment Board who sits on transportation.
And the Plan Commission?
And the Plan Commission who sits on.
So you have 2.
And part of the reason for that is because it's to keep the various boards and commissions well informed of what each of them are doing. So we act a little bit more in harmony rather than, I think there have been times in the past where one board might have been trending in a particular direction on certain issues and another board was trending in an opposite direction, and it wasn't until we actually had a joint meeting that there was a realization. It was staff that was caught in the middle. So by having, for instance, someone from the Environment Board, we get, and it's usually someone who's very interested in transportation policy, so that's very helpful to us because they bring a special expertise to the Transportation and Parking Committee.
Makes sense.
And then having someone from the Plan Commission is helpful because then they might know more. They are listening to what we're talking about transportation policy, and they're taking that back to the Plan Commission, who are looking at projects or changing the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. Alderman Simmons.
So those don't go through a mayoral appointment, though. It's just an assignment so I'm excluding those.
Okay. All right.
I just want to be clear. That makes sense. It's very efficient. I'm excluding those, but I'm talking about mayoral appointments.
And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Francelno spent the better part of this morning reviewing this. The ad hoc committees were not included in the process, in the request that I made to her. So I'm happy to ask her to do it one more time, but again, she does this always. And Okay.
Wait, you're talking Becky.
And I think, so City Manager, do you have direction on, I don't think it's a policy matter, I think it's more administrative process and procedure, is that fair to say?
Certainly. Ms. Franciano is helped by Kimberly Richardson. They've been working together. The council has asked for more staff resources on this matter since Ms. Richardson's been here, so it's been nearly 2 years. So I think it's just a matter of continuing to put that forward. Given difficult budgets, it's difficult for me to ask you for additional staff to spend times on boards and commissions. There's a lot to do, but I hear the request to do more, and I hear the request to do more outreach and to keep you better informed of vacancies on a regular basis, and so we will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a reference by Alderman Rainey regarding policy for board and commission recusal. We do have a staff memo addressing some of the points. Alderman Rainey, did you want to speak to it?
The issue came up on Economic Development Committee where a member, and I'm been given permission to say names. Hecky Powell serves as a small business owner on the Economic Development Committee. Hecky Powell is in a position right now at his rib place to expand, and there are certain programs in the Economic Development Department that allow for people to apply for certain grants. Under that program, it's not a competition. You are either eligible or you're not. You select certain contractors, and they give you bids for certain work that is either approved or not approved. But it's not a matter of competition. You are either, no matter who you are, I mean, they could even blank out names, you are either eligible or you're not. It doesn't matter who you are, you're either eligible or you're not. So he indicated that he would like to apply for a grant. He was told that he was not eligible to apply for a grant because he was on the Economic Development Committee. I argued with our legal department that that was not fair, that one of the things he brought to the Economic Development Committee, and I thought other members of the committee agreed with me, was a certain perspective, being a born and raised Evanstonian, a minority, who engaged more youth than probably any other single employer in the city of Evanston. Hecky always has a project. The more trouble you're in as a youth, the more likely he's to snatch you up and try to make you, what he considers a success. And he's just been an amazing success story. And so he brings a certain snarkiness and a certain perspective to that committee that many of us don't have. And he's been very helpful. And he's been on the committee not quite a whole term, I don't think. And he really likes being on the committee. And he was astonished when he was told that he could no longer be on the committee if he were to apply for a grant, not that he would have to compete for, but if there were money available, he would either be eligible like somebody else or not eligible. And I stress that because it's not a matter of competing. And of course, he wouldn't be present for the debate of whether or not we would approve it. He wouldn't be present he wouldn't be able to participate in any discussion. But the word was, no, you couldn't, because there would be a conflict of interest. So I mentioned several other situations I thought in the city that were very similar. And I was told, well, those are different. I said, what if he quits the committee? Which he absolutely did not want to do. I was told that even if he quits the committee, that might influence still the committee, and that matter would still probably have to go to the Ethics Committee. So my purpose for bringing it here, even though I realize this has to go to the Ethics Committee if he doesn't want to quit, and even if he does quit, I guess, is to talk about whether or not we can change the Ethics Committee language. Because obviously, the way it stands, it has to go to the Ethics Committee. And if it has to go to the Ethics Committee, there's no point in us discussing it here. But I wanted to discuss the reason why it has to go to the Ethics Committee. That's why I brought it here. I think Alderman Sefferdin's issue is totally different than this. I mean, that's obviously a pecuniary thing. He has to recuse himself from that. And that's an easy one. That's an easy one. But I thought this was very different. And my argument here is that no small business person really should take the chance of ever being on, and Alderman Simmons and I have talked about this because she has a wonderful idea for a program for small business people in the 5th Ward and maybe the 2nd Ward. I don't know about the 8th Ward, where, I mean, a whole new program would be, and we should want to encourage those folks, as we've just talked, to apply for committees like this. But why would we want them on the committee if they're totally zeroed out of ever participating in any of the advantages that the committee offers?
Thank you. And that makes sense to me. When the issue first came up, I see no lights, so I'll go ahead and talk. My assumption was, my instinct was that, okay, well, if there's a recusal, that should take care of it. I understand that the ordinance says what it says. My hope is that when the Board of Ethics does their full vetting, I think as it's referred, that they'll take this into account. I mean, Alderman Rainey's point is well taken. If you we just finished a conversation about how hard it is to staff the committees and how hard it is to find representative members of the community. If you're in the community and you are engaged, you're going to have things come up. I mean, that's the whole point. You want people that are engaged in the community, and to find somebody who doesn't have any contact with a business or any contact with the government or any contact with a nonprofit. Well, okay, we don't have those people, or if you do, they might not be your first pick to be on your committee. So hopefully they can take a look at that and be mindful of that general idea. You're comfortable with the reference to the committee for the right?
But the real issue here is you either are eligible or you're not. It really doesn't matter if we really, the committee really loves Hecky and we really want him to have this money. If he weren't eligible, he couldn't get it.
Right.
It's not, there's no partiality here. You either meet all the check marks or you don't. If you don't get it.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. In thinking about it, I am on the side to support this, and one of the recommendations I want to make is if we can make a statement that goes along with the referral to our Board of Ethics, that just a very simple statement from our council saying that, and I don't know how, if you want to take a straw poll, that we are in general support of this, but it sounds like by listening to Alderman Rainey that we may also have to make an ordinance change or an internal policy to allow for him to apply.
Well, and of course, it's not limited to him. It's just
a person. Yeah, that's exactly.
This has just highlighted the issue.
Right.
Alderman Fleming.
So when I think about this, I'm thinking about when I was on the mental health board and we allocate funds, and some of those people either have been an employee of an agency that's applying or volunteer at an agency. So we, I can't remember what we've done. I think one lady recused herself, but is this fall into the same pot? Because those are people who work very hard and we're voting and giving grants, but we have to be mindful if, they have been an employee, if they have been a volunteer at whatever agency is now applying for the grant, because obviously they're not working there now, but they have been there before, so you may assume that they have a bias and want to give higher marks to that person. I understand for this case, it's just in or out, but I think we should be clear because we do have folks, you know, I don't know about CDBG, but for the mental health board where you're giving money, that we want to make sure we cover that as well.
Thank you, Alderman.
That is covered. That's covered. You can just recuse yourself in that case. That's covered.
And I think that the little bit of a distinction is that that committee member isn't actually asking for the money. It's just they were associated with something that they're no longer associated with. Do we have a motion to transfer the matter to the Board of Ethics?
I'll move it, but I'd also like to have a statement.
Oh, okay. Do we have a motion to move it to the Board of Ethics with the statement that they, Alderman Braithwaite, it's your statement.
Do we need a statement?
Okay, I'll take a crack at it. That they take into consideration the close-knit nature of our community. I don't know how to, Alderman Rainey?
I think we're treading on really thin ice there. We don't want to tell them what to do. The most important piece here is that there's no partiality here. There's what the legal department has said is that there is no way that, given that he is a member of the committee, that we would not be showing partiality to him in making this decision. We really have no decision to make. Our staff takes a look at these requests, and they either meet the requests or they don't. Their projects either meet the requests or they don't. There are 50-50 deals where, you know, if your project is 50, you know, they determine by virtue of the size of the project, it's a 50-50 thing. So if it's 30,000, they're going to get 15,000 for the proper use of the funds, and they're either going to get it or they're not.
Right.
And
Alderman Fleming.
All right, so Corporation Counsel, can you clarify for me as I'm reading this, how does this compare then if you have, I mean, this is a huge hypothetical, but we have some other pool of money that the city, you can apply for, and we are talking about a person who, you know, formerly was a city staff or is a city staff. I just want to make sure if we go this route with Board of Ethics, we are making sure we're covering all of our bases and someone doesn't come up later and say, I want to apply for X, Y, and Z, but according to this, I'm prohibited.
Members of the Rules Committee grant for our Corporation Counsel. I think that the dialogue that is going on right now is extraordinarily helpful in that it raises all the potential questions that need to be further vetted at the Board of Ethics. So I don't think I can really capture that hypothetical because it ties into everything that's just been discussed. But I think that the roadmap that this committee has laid out in terms of all the possible universe of issues that is attendant to a part of the code that was not passed in 2006 with the kind of flexibility to address all of these issues, this is where this dialogue is extremely helpful. I would caution, I think that all of these issues are complex, and a lot of them rest upon the fact that each fact pattern is dynamic, and each committee is dynamic in terms of the opportunities that it presents to applicants and the opportunities that it presents to those who serve on those committees. So I would be very cautious in asking the council to keep that in mind. This is going to be a full process, and it also really ties in, I think, to the subsequent memo in tonight's packet where we are talking about and suggesting that it's appropriate to for this committee to invite the Board of Ethics and start the dialogue also there in terms of the issues as you see them and should be framed with the Board of Ethics and how the Board of Ethics can best help and serve to get clarity, because I think everybody's goal right now is to get clarity and consistency. And right now, the way that the Code of Ethics is currently drafted and implemented, there's much less clarity than desired. So this is a part of that iterative process.
So, Mr. Chairman, if Alderman Braithwaite is not, could we just move the issue to
That's
the
fine.
Board of Ethics?
I'll withdraw.
With all deliberate speed?
Yes.
So we can get this
Yes.
over with so we can move on.
Alderman Fisker, did you want to add something?
The only thing I wanted to say quickly is I absolutely agree with Corporation Counsel. And I think this is something that's the purview of the Board of Ethics. We can certainly send our concern and the issues that we've raised to them and let them work it out.
Yes.
But I think
We can send our minutes or something.
Right, but sending specific wording to them is a really bad idea. So we'll continue that discussion on the next item.
Well, maybe even a little video clip of our exciting conversation. Alderman, I'm sorry, Mayor Hagerty.
Thank you, Chair Wilson.
Second.
I don't know if this has happened before. Again, and I do recognize that it is dynamic, but has there ever been a situation, or could we envision a situation where there's $100,000 or whatever in the Economic Development Fund, let's say, that people are submitting proposals for, and the committee gets, proposals for $150,000, and then they're making a choice about, on objective data, Alderman Rainey, as you're saying that this is very objective, in terms of how they're going to parse that money out. And if there's a business member of the committee who's applying for one of the grants, how does that, impact the decision making?
I think they do first come, first serve, but you could clarify that with the staff, but I really think they do first come, first serve.
So do we have the motion to refer to the committee?
Yeah, so moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that will be referred to the Ethics Board. The next item is a reference from Alderman Fisk. We do have a little short staff memo on that particular issue on best practices for the Board of Ethics. I see that the analysis suggests that we invite the board to present their work to us at a future meeting. Does that sound good to you? Go ahead. Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, that's fine, but I think part of the reason that I suggested this is that, and frankly, I'm really glad that this is moving forward, is that I think our ethics ordinance is confusing. I don't think it's clear. We need to figure this out. I mean, talk about transparency. Most of the people here tonight are here because of transparency, and I think that needs to be reflected better in our code of ethics. There's all sorts of questions. I think, was it you, Mr. Chair, that mentioned that we're a small community? Someone did mention that, we're a small community. We all know each other. We basically trust each other, but that doesn't mean that we always make the right decisions that result in a accurate interpretation on the part of the public. And I think making our code of ethics more transparent, more easily understood by the public, I think is helpful. I've had various concerns about our ethics code over the years. Apparently, one of those concerns is campaign financing. For example, should someone who has an active application with the city be making a campaign contribution? Right now, that's allowed. I don't know how that appears to the public, and I would like to know, and I would like to discuss that as a council and see if we can do things that engenders more trust on the part of the public in our ethics process. But there's all sorts of other things, and I think that again, just clarifying our ordinance, looking at what other cities are doing that are looking at the best practices in other cities is going to be helpful. We have a relatively new Board of Ethics, and I think it will be helpful for them to work through this. And so for right now, I think it would be helpful to hear from them, but I think we need to, again, have these other codes from the other communities shared with us so that we can read through them and just take a little bit of time to think about how these decisions are being made, but most importantly, how the public is perceiving the work that we do and the decisions that are made in terms of ethical considerations in the city. It's really important to everybody. So if you haven't read the Code of Ethics, read it and see if you can figure it out what it says, because I have trouble with it.
Very good. City Manager, I'm sorry, Alderman Fleming.
That's okay. I have a quick question for Corporation Counsel. On this memo, you mentioned a couple places in the code, 1-10-8 and 1-10-9, that you suggest be revised. Is that, I'm assuming that revision is not happening until the Ethics Board goes through their whole analysis and comes to us and all that. Okay.
That is correct. I was just trying to do some quick issue spotting in response to what Alderman Fisk had raised with me some weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you have general direction. You'll invite the Ethics Board with that.
And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my sense is that this will occur sometime after the first of the year.
After the budget cycle.
After January.
Yeah.
So just to make sure there's no expectation that this is happening sooner.
Is that okay?
Mr. City Manager, could you just share with us some of the ordinances from other communities, though, so that we can, like over the holidays, we can read through and.
Certainly, Mr. Farrar. It looks like there are 3 mentioned in the memo, so we can get those to you shortly.
Yeah.
Okay. I might wait until after the holidays.
The referral goes immediately. I just want to make sure there's not an expectation that this is coming back next week, that this will be something that you'll see after the first of the year.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the discussion of the Freedom of Information Act policy. So believe it or not, we're all really glad that people are here, because obviously there's a lot of discussion going on in the community. The city clerk was good enough to forward the meeting minutes from the 25th. I'm going to read the meeting minutes just so people are clear on what did or didn't happen at the last meeting, because we of course heard all the comments, and a lot of people seem to have had some misunderstandings. Clerk Reed has been doing the FOIAs, so he's not been stripped of that, and I'm sure he would appreciate everybody knowing that he's hard at work doing that work. So he has been doing that since that meeting. But at that last meeting, the council directed staff to take the next request system from public view until the materials on there could be reviewed by the law department to ensure that there was no private information remaining, that we set a policy effective immediately that police reports produced as part of the FOIA be made available to the requesting party, and that we schedule it for discussion today, which we're here for, and that we designate a FOIA officer. I think Alderman Fisk had pointed out that the previously designated FOIA officer is obviously no longer the city clerk. So Clerk Reed is no longer the clerk, and I think his
Green.
I'm sorry, Clerk Green. Clerk Reed is the clerk. Clerk Green is no longer the clerk, and of course it would not be appropriate that he remain the designated FOIA officer. And switching pages here. We do have the memo here. The item is broken out into two aspects. We have the policy itself. Myself, other staff members have talked to Clerk Reed a number of times in trying to develop, I think, something that will be a workable policy. The next request system is something that was in place for well over a year before Clerk Reed was here. Personally, I never paid particularly close attention to it. Some things came to my attention, and these were more concerns about how the next request system operated. So that's I think what our primary focus should be here. The next request system is an outstanding tool for transparency. That's why we implemented it. In conjunction with this, we've also launched an open data portal that we are adding data to on an ongoing basis. So in my 8 years here, we've been very, very focused on transparency. And when I look back over the 8 years, when I started, and unfortunately, none of us get to shadow our predecessors. We get elected, we jump right in. But since I started, I'm very pleased to see that access to information has greatly improved. And we want to keep that trend going. It is of great value. It is of great importance to every single one of us, and that's something that we strive for. That said, it is always, of course, important to protect information that is supposed to be protected by law, and that is a priority as well. So, anybody want to talk about what we have as far as some of the proposals in the memo? Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify and make sure that I understood you correctly, what I understand, and that is that right now, our designated FOIA officer is Rodney Green and the 2 members of his staff, neither of which are in the office anymore. So right now, we don't have a FOIA officer who is an elected official or a person on staff. Corporation Counsel, could you just explain that to me?
The policy as was drafted and adopted by resolution in 2014 needed to be updated in any event to account for the changes with respect to the status of FOIA officers who are no longer with the city and serving in a FOIA officer capacity. So it's currently undesignated right now.
Okay, so currently now we have no FOIA officer.
Nothing designated by the city.
Okay, and we need to designate a FOIA officer.
Under the statute, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Clerk Reed.
I just want to, respond in that I think it should be written into our city code that the city clerk is the FOIA officer. That way there's no confusion moving forward about who it is, and if it's written into the code, that will solve this issue moving forward, where we don't have to individually name FOIA officers. So we can simply read the clerk and his staff are the FOIA officers.
Alderman Rainey.
Do we have an acting FOIA officer since our last meeting? I'm sorry, do we have an acting FOIA officer?
Well, it's my understanding that the clerk's office was doing the work, and when the new clerk was elected, the clerk's office continued to do the work and continues to this day. So I don't think until issues came up with the FOIA policy, which was, I think, 3-4 years ago, nobody went back and looked at that particular document until recently. So, of course, it was, I think, I would call it an oversight or perhaps misjudgment to put the person's name in the ordinance or in the resolution. It probably should have said city clerk and his deputies, but it didn't say that. So we're here to correct that.
Didn't I read someplace that the chief of police said that he has a FOIA officer at the police department?
We've got one thing called a FOIA officer, but as Clerk Reed can perhaps explain in a bit more detail, the clerk is not the person who actually goes through all the records, of course. And Clerk Reed, why don't you kind of explain how that policy, that procedure?
Could somebody answer my question? I know I read that the police chief said that
he
at
misspoke.
the police department he has a.
Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, as I think the clerk is about to tell you, there are multiple staff members in multiple departments that work on FOIA requests.
Right.
There is one individual at the police department whose primary job it is to focus on that. There are others there are others in other parts of the organization.
But who is that?
I'm sorry?
She asked who it is. It is Sarah Jones or Pandora Pratt.
Okay, thank you.
So the records, practically speaking, most of the requests from the police department come for records. So Ms. Pratt is the supervisor of the records division. The other individual, Sarah, has the most practical knowledge, and she's able to process the information quickly. So that's where we're at with the police department.
And Clerk Reed, why don't you kind of, just for the benefit of all the people who've come out, explain what happens to the piece of paper when it comes into your office so they have a better understanding of that, or a more complete understanding.
Gets sent to the requester. So the way it works is when a FOIA request comes in, unless it's for documents that are held directly by my department, which are relating to ordinances and other records produced by this body, we send it off to the proper department. So if it's a request for emails, for example, we send that off to the IT department, and someone from IT pulls those records, and then those records, in my belief, an unredacted copy of those records should come to my office and also to the law department. And the way it's been set up in the past, for example, the law department would then be responsible for redactions of documents, which, in my belief, is something that could be taken on by the clerk's office, So then the clerk's office could then be responsible for determining whether records are unduly burdensome under the FOIA Act. When it comes to the police department, same thing. Documents go to, they come into my office. They are then submitted to the proper department. If it's the police department, to the police department. The police department, Ms. Jones, is responsible for redactions. They send it off to me, and then I release it. If it's anywhere else that's physically located here in this building, then same process, but we typically just receive the unredacted copy, and we work to get it to the requester or help requesters narrow a request or figure out what they're looking for.
Okay, and I think it's fair to say that the Next Request system, with its tracking tools, makes the whole process a lot easier, correct?
Yeah, the Next Request system helps us stay in compliance. It gives us notifications as to when documents are due, and it keeps a log of all of the communications that are made with the requester, which is required by FOIA law. And since this vote was taken on the 25th, my office has been without the Next Request system. And, as you read the motion, I don't believe that was the intention, but that was what happened. And so we've had to deal with FOIA,
Yeah, and I think it was more a function of the technology, how the system works, right? Alderman Fleming?
All right, so I'm not a FOIA expert. Here are my thoughts from the memo. So the first part about the resolution and, making these parameters in place, Clerk Reed spoke some about some parameters that he was setting up on the next request system. I guess my overall concern is to make sure that in using the next request and being very transparent as a city, that we also balance that, or don't overshoot and lose protection of citizens, right? So juveniles, personal information, so on and so forth. Those are the two things that I would like to see happen. So I do think the next request system is helpful and should go back up, because in this day and age of technology, we want to be able to have people not have to fax. I mean, who even has a fax machine, but, or call or come in or whatever. However, I do want guarantee, or I shouldn't say guarantees, I do want to make sure that when the information is up there in terms of request, and then when the information travels back from whatever department, that the redactions are correct, that the posting is correct, that if it needs to go just to an individual, that's what happens, that if it needs to go, if it can go elsewhere. I would like to see us using the open, what do we call it, the open portal, open data portal system as well, because even when I have, come to look at the FOIA system, just the way the next request is set up, you kind of have to go through a bunch of different things, unless I'm not using it correctly, which is a little bit cumbersome. So if someone wants to request how many streets we plow and what that cost or whatever, and they do that through FOIA, and their friend wants to see it as well, maybe that just goes on the open data portal page or something, so that you're not trying to rifle through and look for your friend's name or date or whatever for that information. I know the police have a new dashboard up there. I think that's another area that we could use to post if someone has FOIA something that's not private, that's not, I guess it's not private, that we can, work with the police department to make sure that that stuff is maybe going on a police portal page, so that if folks are looking for things that are just police specific, they know what page to go to. I don't know who currently manages the open data portal, but I would think that that's something that the clerk's office can work with IT or whoever does that to make sure the appropriate information is going up there. But I do think this is something that, I do FOIAs not here, but other places. And it does seem like in other places where there's a staff member who does FOIA, I'm always surprised that they send me the information, but then if you go on their website, there's no other way to find it. So I think people have become, whoever's paying attention has become accustomed to us having next requests. I'm glad to hear that other people want to keep it up there. The other thought I had was beginning paragraph of page 14, and it says, response categories could be published on a system. Further information will be that second, anyway, so it looks to be like we're saying, or the suggestion might be that if I request something, say about, street plowing, that the category or the next request would just say Cicely Fleming street plowing or public works or whatever it would say, but maybe not more information. Again, just the way the system is set up, if someone's looking for something specific or they're just snooping, I would want to make sure that we make that an easy search for them. So instead of just being able to click on my name or click on Public Works and see in general what I requested, that data, if it's not, violating the privacy of our citizens or obviously breaking the law, whatever FOIA law says, that information can be accessible by clicking and getting the PDF if that's what people are interested in doing. And then my last thing on here, which I guess is just a clarification point, on page 14 where it talks about a checklist, Corporation Counsel, can you just explain, is that a checklist we're already using? Is this a new checklist that we will be looking to use? I was a little confused there.
It's a checklist that's already being used.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, I'm on page 14. It starts number 2.
Oh, direct the city laws department to review that.
And so right now, can you explain to me how so the FOIA request comes in through the clerk's office, and at what point does the legal department come in and go through this checklist?
It typically comes up when the clerk comes to us with a question or concern.
Okay, so is that checklist something, again, not being a FOIA expert, but is that checklist something that the legal department and the clerk's office could work together on? And so maybe that's some kind of...
That's what we've done in the past.
That's what you've done before.
Yes.
Okay, so perfect. So those are my overall thoughts. I do like the idea of being a little more coordinated between the legal office and the clerk's office, as well as the clerk's office and the police department. But I do want us to, I would support keeping FOIA in the clerk's office, but again, making sure that our citizen base is kept private and protected, and then using the police portal, that they have been doing a pretty good job about getting stuff up there, and then using our open data portal on the city website for some other information to be accessible.
Okay, Mayor Hagerty? Oh, okay, quick read.
Yeah, I just want to clear up some of Alderman Fleming's concerns. Number one, with the protection of residents' privacy. On the 25th, I laid out a number of procedural changes to how FOIA will be processed that will ensure all of those parameters that you laid out are met. One would be the embargoing of request that would give a 5 to 10 day window before anything goes live, and so that would give us a two-step verification system to make sure that everything's been properly redacted before anything's released. I'm also agreeable that all police reports should be released only to the requester. And I think anything beyond that, we have to have a thoughtful discussion on. I also want to work with every department, the legal department and every other department in the city, to put together a list of all documents that are available by department and clearly break down that list. That'll make it easier for folks to just know what they can access. And then lastly, I serve on the Open Data Governance team, which will be bringing forth a resolution to the council, I believe, next month in early November regarding our open data policy. We've switched over to a system. It's called Socrata. Chicago uses that system as well. That's where they maintain their FOIA log, and I am in agreement that we definitely have to work to make sure that data sets that are pertinent to the larger community, whether it's about snow plowing, whether it's about juvenile arrest data, or whether it's other non-sensitive data sets, that information be made available on Socrata for the larger public to view.
Mayor Hagerty?
Thanks. I certainly never ran for mayor and thought we were going to have a huge conversation about FOIA. It never came up during the campaign. I think everybody on the former council, this council, and in the public in general thinks that we should have open government, and we should be transparent and we should be accountable. The question becomes, was there an issue with the way that we were handling FOIA before Clerk Reed came into office? And so I just want to explain how I understand we handled FOIA prior to that. And so if a FOIA request came into the city fulfilled that FOIA request and delivered that FOIA response to the requester. And that's how it was handled. And we did have the next request system, and information was put up onto the next request system, so you could come through and you could see, the requests that had been made. Did you want to add something, Devon? I'll let you.
I just wanted to, I just wanted to correct that. That's not exactly how the system worked prior to me taking office. Some requests were made public, some weren't.
Okay. But after you took office, I think, very well intentioned, you want to make sure that, government is completely open. And so you set a policy, that said that not only will I fulfill FOIA responses to the requester, but I'm going to open it up publicly for anyone to see, for the public.
Yes, for the most part. What did change is that requests automatically went live, and so whenever someone put something in, that automatically went live, and that's something I've addressed in the changes. And then yes, with certain requests, information was released just to the requester, and other requesters were released publicly. And there were, a few mistakes along the line, and we have that.
Sure. So the conversation to be had, I think, is a very legitimate conversation, which is, should FOIA responses that the city then issues go to the entire public or just go to the requester? I believe, and you and I have had conversations, and I've said this to anyone that wants to talk to me about this, that I feel strongly that we ought to have the next request system, that the next request system is a great system for visibility for anyone to see the requests that have been made. So you could say, I'm interested in request number 37. Could I see that same response? But that the response should go to the requester. And if the requester is, the Evanston Roundtable or the Chicago Tribune, and they see something here and they want to write an article and make it public, they can make it public. If it goes to, John Smith out there in the public, and he wants to see something here and he wants to put it up on his own platform, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, he can do that. And the reason that I feel this way is because I can tell you, in the few months that I've been mayor here, if somebody said, I'm going to FOIA Mayor Haggerty's emails from September 1st to September 30th, here's the kind of emails that would go out there. Dear Mayor, I've lost my job. Do you know of any openings in the city? Do you know of any openings, elsewhere in town that I might apply for? Dear Mayor, let me tell you about my neighbor, Smith. This guy is doing all sorts of illegal activities, okay? He's building a new addition to his house, and I'm certain he doesn't have all the proper permits. Dear Mayor, my neighbor has a pit bull that will not stop defecating on my property. Dear Mayor, you're an idiot. I can't believe that you would do this. These are the kind of emails I get. And under a policy where we release all FOIA responses to the public, all of that information could become public. None of that is protected by the FOIA law. Yes, juveniles are protected. Yes, sexual assault victims are protected. But that other information isn't protected. And there's a reason it's not protected, because the public ought to be able to know who our elected officials as well as other city officials are communicating to. And so that's why that exists, so you can see who everybody's communicating to. So the policy that is before the council tonight, or the Rules Committee tonight, says that FOIA responses go to the requester only. I think, and so that's one thing for this committee to consider. The second thing that it says, though, is it says that you're going to group into categories on next request the requests that come in. And I'm not so certain I'm sold on that. I think that the public ought to be able to go there and have a good sense of what these requests are, so they could say to themselves, I'd like to see that FOIA response that the city provided for, whatever it may have been.
If I can respond to
Clerk Reed.
Yep. To your last point, or actually I'll start with your first point. I think that's, Mr. Klein mentioned that I think that we need to have a more thoughtful discussion of this and look into actual PAC opinions, because many of the concerns that you raised are actually already solved either by FOIA law or by binding PAC opinions. And so that information, if someone's like, my neighbor is a bonehead and their dog keeps pooping on my lawn, that's something that would not be necessarily released by FOIA. because it doesn't serve a larger, it is truly personal. That seems to be personal. And in the case of, someone says the mayor is a bonehead or whatever it is, the term that you use, then that's also, something that could go out to the public. Secondly, as with the your second point regarding documents going only to the requester, I think we can. And in fact, can you do me a favor and restate your second point?
Yeah, I don't know if it was my second point. It was all in there that I feel strongly that that we should be transparent and accountable, but the requests come in should go to the requester only, and that we should have a next request system, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So
that does show what the requests were without any identifiable personal information.
The second thing was the grouping of documents. It blanked for a second. The grouping of documents. When you search on the next request system, it's actually already you can do a search by department. So there isn't necessarily a new step that would have to be taken to make that feature available. But alongside being able to run a search by department, you can just broadly search through documents. One of the things that I think we should also address in this policy is one, especially when it comes to the police department, the naming of requests. I've made this request of the department to no longer name documents after the requester. One that'll help protect some anonymity, because I don't think we're going in the direction that Chicago has, where we want to list necessarily the names of all requesters. It's not a practice we've had in the past, and it's not something that I'd necessarily advocate for. So changing the name of the documents from the requester's name to a more broad, if it's police report, just say police report, or whatever the case may be. I'm in agreement with that.
Changes the
Pardon?
duties. Are we going to hear about that?
Could you please refrain from, we're having a conversation about what we're doing. The clerk himself is speaking. I'm a little baffled at why you would interrupt the clerk when he's talking about what he's trying to do.
And then, that'll end my comments there.
Okay. Alderman Fisk.
I try to tell people who are writing to me, and thank you, Mayor, for your comments, because I don't think the public fully understands, nor should you. I mean, you do have lives of your own, unlike some of us who do this full time. When you write to us, that's public information. I mean, that's public record. Everything you write to us, so that if the mayor is correct that there is a request for all of the mayor's emails for May 2017, then the clerk is going to have the decision to make about which of those emails to share and which not to share, and that's fine. But I think you, the public, need to understand that when you participate via email, you're now part of this. So if a complaint comes in or a concern comes in and someone is naming a neighbor or whoever they're naming, that might be made public. And so it is a very sensitive issue. The mistakes that we had discussed previously were extremely sensitive issues. And it's good to have a discussion about these because we're all in this together. I mean, you can write to anonymously to, for example, Evanston Now, and you can be a guest and be totally anonymous and write whatever you want to at the discretion of the publisher. But if we're going to have a dialogue in the community, we all need to take responsibility for what we're saying, what we're asking for, and that this is all public, that we're sharing this together and not dividing one another. So just be aware. These are issues that we deal with all the time, and we're here to help. The mayor is not unusual in the requests that he gets. we get a ton of requests asking for help and very serious concerns that affect neighbors and friends and family members and animals and garbage and all sorts of things, but all of that's public. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for raising that. I think it's a really important thing to stress to the community out there.
Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Clerk Reed, for explaining what you're proposing, and also thank you, Mayor Haggerty. I have just a couple of questions just to make sure I understand completely. I share Mayor Haggerty's view, and I think some of Alderman Fleming's views also, that that the response should go to the requester. I appreciate that we will still, and correct me if I got this right, Clerk Reed, that you can, for instance, you're looking for, your topic is parks, and so you can narrow, but you want to see, did somebody else already request this information? So you can search and then just gather FOIA requests on next requests that were just made about parks. And right, so you can do that. So I think if that's possible, that helps the efficiency. It helps the public to see, if somebody else asked a question about this topic, maybe even asked a better one, I can get there, then I could say I'm making the same FOIA request. I do feel strongly that the information should go just to the requester because of the issues that Mayor Haggerty raised, and Alderman Fisk is right. We do. I think a lot of people don't realize that when you write to us, that it is a public document. And sometimes I just gently remind people that I have people write to me and say, "These are my questions, but please don't use my name. I'd like to get these responses, but please don't use my name in any way." And I tell them I won't use their name in any way. And so I just make it, I'm curious, and I ask a department, I have a question. And then I send the response back to the person. But so I do think people have, I don't think people expect that an email they wrote maybe about not being able to pay their water bill to the mayor would ever show up publicly on that next request system. And so I think that's something that, maybe they should expect that, but I don't think that's fair to them. And then actually the other question I have, may I finish? The other question I have for Clerk Reed is, you and I had a discussion about, is our next request system then hooked up or connected or linked with Google?
Yes.
Okay. Because unfortunately, for all of us, you may not know this, Google never deletes anything. It's there forever. And so I think that's another important aspect of this, so let's say you write to the mayor and say, my house is in foreclosure. Can you tell me what programs the city offers about this? And if this is linked to Google, you may get your house out of foreclosure. You may completely recover, except if somebody Googles your name, Google searches your name, up pops your name, and that turned up in that FOIA response.
Mayor,
okay. Am I correct?
No, you're incorrect with that.
Okay. Well, then explain to me how, because I'd like to know, because I think that's the concern that I think most of us would have.
Yeah. So one to clarify, I'll start with. We have the option. Before I took office, we decided, or someone decided, or Next Request decided that Google's spiders, as they're called, would crawl through our Next Request system, and that's a very technical term, meaning that it'll catch data that is in the Next Request system, but it only catches data that is put into the public request box. So if someone's name was associated with a FOIA, it wouldn't capture that. It also wouldn't capture anything that is in the release document. So you wouldn't be able to Google and find things that are in the PDF that's released. It'd only be what's in the public request form or the request box. But then secondly, we also have the option to contact Google and say, hey, we don't want you sending your spiders through our Next Request system, and then no longer will things on Next Request pop up.
So I would, and that's good to know. So I would like to know, perhaps from you, Clerk Reed, or from someone else, the pluses and minuses of having those spiders go through our system, and then let us make that decision about whether we want to do that or not. So then the other question I have, just to make sure I understand, so if we follow what we're discussing here, is the person who is making the request, is their name in the Next Request box, or is that, can you make a request without having your name go public? Is that?
Yes, so one, as it's set now, the requester's name is not made public. What does happen is, and then, that Alderman Wilson rightfully noticed, is that when the police department names a document, a PDF, that may get captured, and that may be a way that folks can find it. But as long as we stop naming documents after the requester, we can address that.
Okay, then that I think that's very, very useful to do it that way. And obviously, we should stop naming documents after the requester or any other person who's involved in the file. That's all of my comments.
Right, and that's obviously a good point. So, one of the conversations Clerk Reed and I've had is with regard to trying to go forward with the Next Request system and the Open Data Portal. So it's a goal to try to figure out ways. We have it in place. It's been in place for a long time. Is to find ways to expand that. For example, if we have staff working on, all of the arrests from such and such a date to such and such a date. If there's a news story that relates to that, we don't want to have staff respond to the same request 18 times. So to the extent that we can minimize that, that's a really useful tool. It's helpful for staff. It's helpful for the community looking for the information, and that's one of the goals that we had when we first implemented the system. Going back to, I forget, Alderman Fisk, I think was your point, but there was a legitimate problem. Okay, collectively we identified a legitimate problem. We have had a collaborative conversation to solve a legitimate problem, okay? And hopefully people can appreciate that. If you look at what we've done as a community as far as transparency is concerned, I don't think anybody could take issue with that. And we continue to strive to do better in that regard. So we've got this draft Exhibit A policy, and I've screensaver.
One last point.
Okay, sure.
One last point that isn't addressed in this and that I think should be is the format that we release documents. I've had a number of requesters come in and request documents that are in XLS format or CSV. This basically means machine readable formats. And it's, 2017, any database that we're using as a city should be able to release the information that's in that database in a machine-readable form. In fact, back in 2013, President Obama in the White House passed a executive order, or signed an executive order that stated that all government agencies, as they're renewing their software, would make sure that that software is capable of releasing these documents in machine-readable format, which, again, any software company that's making, most of the software that we use is made specifically for a government, so you would assume that folks would understand when creating the software that folks may FOIA the data that's in the database. And so I think we should make a conscious effort to also, as we're upgrading our systems, to ensure that all systems can release documents in machine-readable format.
Right, and for the benefit of those who are watching, we do have a target here, a target date of trying to get the Next Request system back online by October 24th. So that was in the memo. So that's been the intention, to get it back online as quickly as possible. All right, I submit that we entertain, and again, I think the policy has been drafted with Clerk Reed's input, Exhibit A policy. Is that fair to say?
No, I mean, Mayor Haggerty, who I commend, and the three of us had a conversation on Friday, but the policy had been drafted at that point without without any input from my office. But I do thank Mayor Haggerty for at least previewing the policy.
Okay. I guess we've discussed that. One of the items we do have to attend to is we do have to designate FOIA officers, and I think obviously I would submit that. I would submit that the City of Evanston's clerk's office and the deputy clerks be designated. I think a lot of the issues that have been raised indicate that there is first of all, this is a collaborative effort. So this is a collaborative effort amongst every department in the city that keeps records. So the clerk works with these departments, works very closely with the law department, and making sure that it's done properly and correctly so people get the right information. That's key, but also so that we protect the rights of others and that we follow the law. So I would suggest that we designate the city clerk, deputy clerk or clerks, and a representative from the law department. That would be my suggestion.
Second.
We did not elect the law department.
Alderman Rainey.
Could I speak to that? I'm in absolute support of that. However, I want to make certain that, and I think Clerk Reed, didn't you go for the training?
Yes.
You did?
Yes, I did.
And are your clerks going to go for the training?
Yes, my deputy clerks have either already gone through it or anyone that's in the office.
But you have a new clerk.
Yes, and he's already gone through the OMA training, and he will complete the FOIA training in the next few days.
That's what I mean, the FOIA training, because that's...
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a motion on the floor, and I got my question answered.
Okay, so I don't know if I stylized it as a motion, so I would move that we...
Okay, I'm moving that.
Let's just do it one at a time. So I would move that we designate
So
the...
wait, just wait. Are we moving Exhibit A? Or
No.
No. Okay,
No.
we're moving...
It's easier, I think, and I think it's more fair to everybody who's watching that we do it one by one, just so everybody understands clearly.
You move the clerk.
I am moving that we designate the clerk,
And
the
I
deputy
second it.
clerks, and a representative from the law department as the FOIA
I
officers.
seconded that.
Alderman Fleming, I think, was next.
Well, I don't have the right Robert's Rules language here, but I would. So I guess I would like to see the clerk's office remain the FOIA officers, and then have the legal team continue in the capacity that they are currently serving, which I don't think is a designated FOIA officer, but however they work together with this checklist and such. So not a designated FOIA officer, but a counselor, or I don't know what I don't know if they have a term at this point.
Friendly amendment is the term.
So as a point of information, you can make a friendly to the amendment. If there's an amendment on the floor, so she asked for Robert's rule. Point of information. She asked for the question of how to move that. So you would move that in the form of an amendment.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.
And I would second that.
Okay, Mayor Haggerty.
So I just have a question. Adding the legal office is the fourth one, so it's the clerk, a deputy clerk, or are there multiple deputy clerks? I don't know. Maybe it's the clerk, a deputy clerk, and then somebody from the law office. We're saying, is that I'm speaking about the proposal up here, but is that sort of an order type of thing, meaning that if the clerk is the FOIA officer, and if he is not available, it's the deputy clerk, and then if the deputy clerk is not the FOIA officer, then it reverts to this third person in the law department. I just like to understand procedurally how that works.
City Attorney, could you just define for us what the FOIA officer means legally?
Under the Freedom of Information Act, the corporate authorities, the City Council, can designate one or more employees or officers to act as FOIA officers. Those FOIA officers are tasked under the statute with promulgating rules and regulations for responding to requests and providing the information accessible on a website that's required under the FOIA Act. If I could just speak to the issue of the FOIA officers, I think that the problem with the first motion is currently styled, with all due respect, Alderman Wilson, is there is the problem of sequential order and differing lines and spans of authority. If there is a clerk with a deputy clerk and then a staff member in the law department, that's not going to be very clear. I think that it would be more appropriate if the will of this council and this committee is to designate the city clerk as the FOIA officer with a deputy clerk, that the staff, and would apply to all staff across the board, that staff has the responsibility to comply with its fiduciary obligations to cooperate with the FOIA officer in timely responding and accurately responding to requests. So that's just my suggestion to hopefully frame the issue and also address the point that Alderman Fleming raised and the mayor about differing the sequential nature of the order here.
Okay, and thank you for that. And my intention, just so I don't have to read 400 Facebook posts telling me what my intention was. My intention was to ensure that the clerk does have the necessary backup and support to do the job as best as he can.
Continue to have two deputy clerks then.
What's that?
I would love to continue to have two deputy clerks then.
Okay, well, that's a budget question, so we'll get to that in a couple weeks. But with Corporation Counsel's advice, I'm understanding it more that as far as the official title of FOIA clerk, it really should just be one person, so there's no confusion on that hierarchy. Okay, so with that, I would move that the city clerk be designated as the FOIA officer.
Second.
And the deputy clerk? Are we doing the deputy clerk?
Okay.
Can we just clarify? I'm sorry.
I'll keep my second.
Are you also saying deputy clerk? I guess I just want to make very clear, since now we have a new deputy clerk.
Well, if I understand,
Or just one person?
It's just one person, if I understand Corporation
Okay.
Counsel right. So
All right.
it's the city clerk. But obviously, as we just described, this is a collaborative effort by the entire city. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And okay, so that's my motion. It was seconded. It's not an ordinance, so it's a resolution.
And we would ask that we be directed to bring back that document. So
Sure.
I think a motion would be direct the Corporation Counsel to prepare an appropriate document appointing the city clerk as the FOIA officer, and we would come back, Mr. Farrar, at the meeting of the 23rd. Is that the goal?
With respect to the FOIA policy?
Just for the
designation.
With the resolution of designation, yes, we will have that prepared for October 23rd.
Great. So the motion would be to direct the law department to prepare such a resolution for your October 23rd agenda.
Okay, I will make a second motion that we direct the city's law department to continue its legal support and to review regarding.
Sorry, are we voting on the first one?
I guess I did forget that. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the city clerk is designated as the FOIA officer. That wasn't so bad, was it? It's a little late, but okay. Next resolution, aspect of the resolution is to direct the city's law department to continue its legal support and review regarding city FOIA responses and compliance per past practice. And it's adopt the rest of the page and a half of details of that. Is there a second for that?
Second.
I'm sorry, Clerk Reed.
Is this adopting the policy that says that requester only? Okay.
No.
Okay, can we vote on this item 2 first?
What are we voting on, clarify?
Page 14 and 15 of the packet.
Thank you.
Clerk Reed,
Number 2.
is there on the request, is there a box that would allow for the requester to authorize their request response to be made public? In other words, could they opt out to privacy?
You mean opt in?
No.
Okay,
Could
opt
they
out.
opt
Right.
out to
Yes,
privacy?
opt out of privacy. Yes, that is as I demonstrated on the 25th, we could add a section in the FOIA request online that says, if you would like your request to be made public.
The response.
The response, that's what I mean. The response to be made public, you can reach out to the office. I think actually on the 25th, I suggested an opt out, and I am, willing to do an opt in.
I think to request privacy would not be correct. I think you should I think you
Have to
should
opt in.
waive privacy.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mayor Hagerty?
Yeah, personally, I'm cautious on the idea that you can opt out or you can opt in for this to be public. I mean, again, I feel strongly that the request, a FOIA request should, a FOIA response should go to the requester only. So again, you take the example, but let's just follow what I think I just heard you say, because you take the example, you say, I want Mayor Hagerty's emails from September 1st to September 30th, and I check a box and say, yeah, you can make this public. You just made it public for all the people that emailed Mayor Hagerty about, again, their problem with their neighbor, the lost job, their, and go forward with it.
Okay, but that's not my motion. That's something different. So.
Okay, I just wanted to make that point to Alderman Rainey.
Yes.
All right, so what's the motion?
Clerk Reed?
We'll finish the motion then.
Okay, so okay, so does everybody have page 14 and 15, item number 2? Okay, I moved. Was there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. My next motion was with regard to 3. Okay, so adopt a resolution, and then of course this is asking the city attorney to come back with something more specific and formal based on our conversation, but a revised FOIA policy. It's not going to be exactly as the attached draft Exhibit A, but I'm asking the city attorney to draft it in conformance with the conversation that we've had tonight as a proposed draft.
Accepting the will of the chair, I would also suggest that based upon the discussion that was had tonight and Clerk Reed's many suggestions, that he take the laboring oar with respect to revising the policy, because I don't want to be in a situation where we're having to try and take tonight's remarks and boil them down into a policy. So I think that it's appropriate for Clerk Reed to have the policy and then insert his suggested revisions based upon some of the new information with respect to spiders and whatnot that...
Right, I agree.
Okay. I don't like spiders. All right, so can you take the first crack at the draft? And so 3 doesn't specify who will do it, but with your suggestion, I move that we adopt the resolution, or that we prepare the resolution for adoption for the next council meeting.
No.
Second.
No, Mr. Chair, we're not proposing the next council meeting.
Okay,
there's
what day is it?
work that needs to be done. I think your next regular meeting on November 13th is probably sufficient. I think that will give the clerk enough time to do that. Otherwise, it's a week, less than a week, and I don't think
That makes sense. Okay, fair enough. Okay. November 13th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's what we'll do with that one. Item number 4, is it realistic to endeavor to reinstate the next request system on October 24th?
If we can, I think it is possible to do that tomorrow. With the next request system down, it's made processing FOIAs in my office extremely difficult, and we've lost the tracking system that we had with the next request. I think it would be as easy as a phone call tomorrow to say that people can start making requests on next request again, or at least allowing the clerk's office, maybe until the policy comes back, to use the next request system just to make requests. If we're going to continue until the 13th to have requests, not be public until we have a solid FOIA policy, that's one thing, and we'll have a thoughtful discussion on the 13th. But in the meantime, I think it's very important that, we be able to use this tool to get our job done effectively and correctly.
Is it technologically possible to put it back online without all the old stuff being visible?
That is. And even to go forward until the November 13th meeting, we can continue to release documents only to the requester, and then when we have a thoughtful policy in place, then we can make adjustments then.
And Mr. Chair, my concern or question would be, what about the statements of the request? So
you mean the request itself?
The request itself. So is the council comfortable with showing the request itself, even if the response is provided just to the requester?
And I think you said you've got an embargo option.
Yep,
How long is that for?
It's until I can set it for however long I want. So I can say
until
that,
so you can conceal the request until you do the response. Is that right?
not only until I do the response, but a set period until after the response has been responded to.
So perhaps, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we would leave that at least until November 14th so that the clerk has access to the system to fulfill the requests, but to leave the requests in what's the term that you used, embargoed for public view, but the system can still be used to fulfill the requests and to provide information.
I just want to be clear, embargoed and there's restricted view, which means the entire request is unavailable to public view, and then embargoing is a separate process, which is that the request will become public just a determined amount of time after it's been responded to.
So, and I think, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that's the question for the council. What is your preference?
So I would make a motion, I guess, to say that we turn on next request, because I think that tracking part probably is helpful if he's getting requests and they need to go to wherever they need to go, but that it's restricted until the policy is back and everybody has clarity. Because I know, I would imagine this technology age and transparency and reassuring the folks out here that if they can go on next request and put their request in, but they understand they can't see everyone's request until we have a final policy that Clerk Reed is going to participate in on November 13th. So that way the job can just be more efficient.
Okay.
Is that a motion?
That was a motion, I think.
Second.
Thank you.
Mayor Hagerty.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused. I'm absolutely okay with the next request system going back online. I think, as I've said tonight and said before, I think the FOIA response should go just to the requester. So that's how I feel. Y'all know how I feel on that. And I think that, again, anyone can go through the next request system, see the requests that have been made in the past, and, can say, hey, I want to see request number 37 or whatever, or response number 37, and then it can be fulfilled to them. In terms of the decision that, here's where I'm uncertain. We've got a draft Exhibit A in front of us. That Exhibit A certainly says that FOIA responses go to the requester, but we just said, okay, the clerk's office is going to revise, I guess, Exhibit A. Okay. Right. And so, I think that, the council ought to make sure that they're clear about, because Clerk Reed and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and we have a difference of opinion. Clerk Reed definitely feels like all FOIA responses should go to the public. Okay? And that's okay. There are people out there that think that, and I think differently, right? I think it should go just to the requester. And so I'm just afraid we're going to come back here in a couple weeks if this Exhibit A is different in that particular aspect. I think some of this other stuff, we can talk about, what's in the next request system and what does that look like. Okay.
But then do we have I'm sorry, what's my turn?
Take a turn.
But then do we have a vote? Because, we have a differing of opinion, right? So you feel like, and I could definitely see with the emails, right? Everyone who emails me doesn't want their email going public. And apparently if there is some case law or whatever you call it that speaks to that, then maybe we need to look at that and make sure that we have that in our policy. But I guess the way I understand this is that the clerk is going to work on the policy, I guess maybe in conjunction with the legal department, and if they come back and it says everything is public, then we as a council decide if everything is public or not, right? Do we not have the power to edit that piece of the policy based on a vote?
Of course, and I think that's part of our future conversation. The way I understand it is, as the technology exists right now, we can turn the next request system on. People can submit their requests.
Not see anything.
They can get their responses, but none of it will be published on the internet until we develop the policy. Is that a correct recap?
Yes.
Okay.
But also, it won't be public.
Yeah, it won't be.
Nothing will be published,
right.
just the ability to use
right. And I think that
technology.
Was, just to clarify, that's Alderman Fleming's motion, and I think.
And I second it, and then the motion's on the floor.
And so, all in favor of proceeding in that regard with regard to the next request system?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. The only other action item on the resolution list is, and I don't think this is an issue, direct that the clerk's office maintain all FOIA-related documents after the city responds to the request, with no post-response edits or changes. This directive will align with the clerk's ministerial duties as a record keeper. I think we're all clear on that. Direct the city clerk to have regularly scheduled Google Calendar meetings with the staff to address FOIA issues in a regular manner. Just so that way you've got a set schedule if that works for you.
Yes, I perfectly agree with that. One thing that I am having an issue with, and I've written to a number of aldermen, is getting responsive documents from the police department. That's something that I hope will also be a direction that the police department deposits all responsive documents with the FOIA officer.
Okay. So I move that we do that, make that direction. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Long meeting, but I think we got a lot accomplished. Okay. So thank you to everybody for your input. Thank you to the council and to Clerk Reed and to the mayor for a thoughtful discussion and some good work. Do we have any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. The city council will convene at 8:40.